Hi everyone, Christina here. Welcome to another card video at my YouTube channel and blog. On today's card, I'm going to be using the Poppy Flowers stamp set from Mom Elephant, and I'm also testing out this watercolor set from Amy Tangerine. This is from Amy Tan's line with American Crafts, and I recently got my hands on this watercolor set, and I thought it would be interesting to show it on camera because it is kind of touted as a really good travel set. It's the size of a sunglasses case, and you can easily throw it into a bag and take it with you wherever you go. But it has everything you need to do some really fun watercoloring. So I'm going to open this up. You can see everything inside. It has a pencil and a pen, and it even has a water container, a sponge to clean your brush tips, a small mixing area, and it has 12 colors as well. So I'm going to take out this little water container. It's so cute. I like that it says Hello Sweetness on it. I did want to mention that you do have to poke a hole in the top of that to make it so it works. So I just did that with a craft pick, but there's a black marker in here. I don't know if this is waterproof. I would assume it is. I did use it in today's card, but I used it after I did all my painting, so I'm not sure. This pencil, you do need some really small fingers to get it out, so you might have to use a brush, or in my case today I was using some scissors to help get that pencil out. But it looks to me like these watercolor paints are half pans. They're like a standard half pan size, and then you get the water container and also a brush marker, or a watercolor marker. Not a marker, a watercolor brush pen. There we go. So I'm using some watercolor paper. This is Saunders Waterford cold press watercolor paper. This is one of those watercolor papers that's super expensive. It's cheaper over in Europe. It was super expensive to get it here in the States. So I have small squares of it that I'm saving for special cards. And I thought this would be a fun card to use it on. So I did sort of an initial stamping to get my card design out onto some scratch paper, just using some black ink onto some regular type paper. This is actually grid paper from Simon, and I use that to help get the positioning of these flowers just right. So I'm using some VersaFine Onyx black ink for my stamping, and I'm stamping each of these twice, or actually 3 times. No, I think just twice. Oh, am I going to go for a third? Nope, just twice. And that's because the watercolor paper is very textured, and I wanted to get a really nice impression. And while that stamp is inked up, I stamped it a 3rd time onto some masking paper so that I could cut out that image, and it will protect the lines and the interior areas of this flower while I stamp other things around it. So I place that over the top, and then I'm going to go right into stamping that other flower from my design. So I'm going to place that stamp over the top and then stamp it a couple of times. And you'll notice that they overlap just a little bit on the edge of that flower, and that's why I masked that first flower. I'm going to create a mask for the second flower by doing the same thing, just using the residual ink left on the stamp, and then stamp that onto some masking paper. This is masking paper from Simon Says Stamp, and I'll cut that out and then place it over the top of that flower. I'm not going to do any more masking on this card. The leaves and stems didn't overlap with each other, so that worked out really well. And I'm going to take these 2 masks and I'm going to save them for later by putting them on the back of my stamp packaging. So I'm going to set the stamp set aside for a minute as far as the watercoloring goes, and I'm going to take the greeting from the stamp set and stamp that in the same VersaFine Onyx black ink, but this time onto some smooth white cardstock. This is Neenah Classic Crest Solar White 80-pound cardstock. So now I'm going to get into the watercoloring. I've taped down my watercolor piece to a hard board so that it will prevent any warping as I paint. And now I'm going to explore this paint set a little bit. I've filled the water brush with water and also that container with water. And then I'm going to take the paints and I'm going to paint myself a little swatch map just so I can see what these colors look like and I know what to expect. I'm going to squeeze some water onto this sponge, and I did have to remove the sponge from the little palette here and squeeze it a few times in order to get it to be really saturated. But I'll be able to use this sponge to clean off the brush tip of my watercolor pen or my aquash brush, I don't know what to call it, which interestingly is really short. It's small so that it can fit inside this container. So I'm going to take a piece of scratch watercolor paper. This is just some leftover watercolor paper that I had in my stash, and I'm going to do little squiggles of color as I go along here. As I started painting these swatches, I was making note in my mind of how I felt about these paints. And I think they're a pretty good color selection. They've covered each color in the rainbow, plus black and white. I don't normally paint with white, but it's there if you need it. There are 2 shades of blue, which I find interesting. One is more of a cobalt blue, and the other is more of an ultramarine. Or just a little more intense blue. And there's also a brown, which I found interesting. So I would compare these paints to, I don't know, more of like in comparison to the Prima watercolor confections. I would say that that's a similar paint consistency like that. They're not super bright or vibrant like, say, Magellan Mission Gold or M. Graham or any of those more artist grade paints. But these are very usable and very workable. I think for me personally, I love this palette so much that I might consider taking out these half pans and replacing them with like a custom selection of my own paints. I think that would be a really fun way to utilize this palette. But I think the paint selection that comes with the palette is actually pretty great. And so I'm going to be using only the paints in the palette for the main painting of this whole piece here. I will eventually add some white gouache because I found that that white shade in the palette isn't quite strong enough for me. I mean, you can use it to pale back some color, select color mix, but you can't really paint that white on top of other things. I don't think it's quite strong enough. So I used some white gouache for that. And I also grabbed a metallic gold paint from a Finetec palette. But other than that, I used only things from this palette. In fact, this is the only brush I used. And I did want to show you how you can refill this water brush. It's super easy with that container that comes in the palette. In fact, I might, if I don't take the palette with me somewhere, I might just steal that water container out of it and take it with me because it's really, really convenient. I'm going to mix up a few more colors here, and then I'm going to get to showing you how I filled that water brush. Right now, I'm just mixing up some shades for the background. I thought it would be cool to paint the background and then come back and intensify the color on those poppies. Okay, so my water brush was pretty empty at this point. So I grabbed that water container, and it has a really pointy end on it. You can just put that inside the brush, squeeze, and it fills it up with water. So super convenient. This is going to be so great for travel. I don't know that I would trust it to have water in it when I go through security or get on a plane with it, but or even in a checked bag. But if I'm going to have it with me at all times, and I know it's not going to be jostled around too much, I think I would totally be okay with carrying it with water inside of it already. So I put out just clean water out onto the background here. It's one of the reasons why I needed to fill it up with lots of water, because I was squeezing that water brush to try to get lots of water out. And then I just put some pale colors for the background. So I'm going to intensify the colors on the rest of the painting and add those white splatters and also gold splatters. And I'm going to turn on some music so you can enjoy the rest of the painting and don't have to hear me yapping on and on and on.
One last ticket before it's gone. One last summer before it's fall. Tune your strings and play your cards. Little words hit me like a game of darts. And you're beating on my drum, and you're beating on my door. breathe. One last lie before the truth. One last fight before I lose. I ask myself, where should I go? Did I do enough to feed my soul? And you're beating on my drum. And you're beating on my door. Running faster than my dreams. And I can't stop to breathe. And you're beating on my drum.
Okay, so all of the painting is pretty much done. So I'm going to use my heat tool to speed up the drying process. And then I took my painting to my die cutting machine and used a circle from the Nested Circles die set from Simon, and I cut this out. I also put a piece of scratch paper on top of that watercolor painting as I put it through my die cutting machine just to protect the plates of the die cutting machine. I didn't want any of that paint or the metallic paint that I splattered on to somehow transfer to that plate. I then created a 4 3/4 square card. So I scored it at 4 3/4 as well. And I put my watercolor piece on some foam tape. I was not shy with the foam tape and pressed that down onto the front of the card. As far as the greeting goes, I'm going to take that greeting that I stamped earlier and use scissors to trim it out with a very, very small border around the edges. I think it's a really fun way to use this greeting and just pop it up around those flowers. Put some foam tape behind that greeting and then directly onto my card front. So that finishes the card for today. Hope you guys enjoy this watercoloring, and I'm really impressed with that watercolor set from Amy Tangerine's line. The palette, the organization of it is really, really cool. I would really recommend it, especially if you have some other pans of watercolor you want to swap in or out. Thanks for watching today. I will catch you guys in another video very soon.